Poland is doing something rare in history. It's getting richer, faster, while sitting on one of the most dangerous fault lines in Europe. It's modernizing infrastructure, building energy security, and rearming at a pace that makes the rest of the continent look slow. And that combination raises a question that sounds dramatic, but is actually very practical. Is Poland quietly entering its next golden age? And what might prevent it from getting there? Because the honest answer isn't a simple yes or no. It's yes, if. And the if is the whole story. Hey, Oliver here. This episode is for people who sense that something big is happening in Poland, and for people who don't trust hype and want receipts. I'm going to aim for both, because this subject deserves excitement without delusion. Before we begin, let's establish two ground rules. First, I'm not selling a fairy tale. A golden age isn't where everything is perfect. It's a period when a country's economy, institutions, security posture, and social mood align enough that ordinary people feel the future is getting better and more predictable. Second, I'm not doing party propaganda. Poland has a duopoly problem. But the moment you treat politics like football teams, you stop protecting the state and start protecting your tribe. All right, let's build the yes case first, because there is a real case to build. Why a Polish golden age is plausible. Poland already proved it can climb fast. The simplest evidence-based starting point is that Poland successfully achieved rapid convergence after the fall of communism. You can debate the story and the politics of it, but the macro trajectory is not controversial. Living standards rose dramatically over a single generation, and Poland turned itself into a major EU economy rather than a peripheral one. This issue is significant because a country establishes a golden age when it demonstrates the ability to orchestrate significant changes and sustain them over decades, not just during a single election cycle. Resilience is the underrated ingredient. Another reason the golden age idea is valid is that Poland has demonstrated resilience under stress. The best-known example is the late 2000s crisis era, when much of Europe contracted, but Poland's economy stayed positive. I'm not saying that period was painless. It wasn't. But avoiding a collapse when others fell into recession is a signal that the system had buffers. Those buffers come from boring things like banking rules, currency flexibility, domestic demand, and investment structure. Exactly the kinds of boring things that determine whether a country survives the next shock. Geography is not destiny, but it's a serious advantage. Poland has a structural advantage that cannot be replicated through branding or slogans due to its geographical location. Poland sits inside the EU single market, close to the industrial core of Europe, and positioned so that supply chains can treat it as a platform rather than a side quest. That geography has real consequences. It makes Poland attractive for manufacturing, logistics, and service centers. It also means Poland can benefit from nearshoring and shorter supply chain thinking when companies decide they want stability, predictable transport corridors, and access to the EU market without crossing too many borders. EU money is not just money. it's also confidence. People love turning the EU into an identity issue, but investors don't think in identities, they think in risk. EU funds matter not only because they build roads, rail, and modernization projects, but because they also signal that a country is fully plugged into the system and governed in a way that keeps big money confident over long horizons. That's why funding freezes or disputes aren't just political theater. They affect credibility and the cost of uncertainty. And conversely, when large funding packages become unlocked again, it's not only a budget story, it's a risk perception story that can influence investment mood. Energy security, Poland's most strategic chapter. Poland has been unusually strategic in its energy sector compared to other parts of Europe, making this one of the strongest pillars for the argument of a golden age. Poland has pushed hard to reduce vulnerability to Russian energy leverage by building alternative routes and import capacity. Such an endeavor is not glamorous. This effort involves constructing pipelines, establishing terminals, securing financing, adhering to timelines, and completing regulatory work. But geopolitically, it's enormous, because energy flexibility equals political autonomy. A country gains the ability to plan for the long term, which is essential for a golden age. Rearmament, deterrence as national insurance, not cosplay. Now the defense story. Poland's rearmament is large and fast by European standards, and it's driven by a very specific mindset. Make yourself too expensive to intimidate. But here's the important part, and I want to say it clearly because YouTube scripts often skip it. Buying equipment is the easy part. The hard part is training, integration, maintenance, ammunition, procurement transparency, and sustaining a mixed arsenal over many years without turning it into a fiscal nightmare. If Poland does the hard parts well, this becomes deterrence, and deterrence supports prosperity because it reduces the risk premium on everything. If Poland does the hard parts badly, this becomes expensive theater that creates future bitterness. The Poland dream. Why quality of life belongs in this discussion. A golden age includes factors beyond just GDP. It's also whether people believe life is getting safer, more stable, and more dignified. One reason the Poland dream framing resonates is that, for many people, the modern aspiration is not to become a billionaire overnight. It's to build a stable life in Poland without needing to emigrate to achieve it. That aspiration, stability, safety, predictable institutions, decent services, and rising comfort, is actually compatible with a golden age mindset, because it encourages support for long-term projects rather than only short-term wins. What might prevent Poland from reaching it? Threat 1. Demographics. The slow burn limiter. If there's one threat that doesn't care about politics, it's demographics. Poland is experiencing an aging population and low birth rates, which presents a significant challenge that cannot be addressed with slogans. Demographics affect everything: labor supply, healthcare capacity, pensions, education planning, regional vitality, and the ability to fund big ambitions like defense and modernization. If the workforce shrinks while obligations grow, you get a squeeze that forces ugly choices. Winning here is not magic. It's a stack of practical policies that make family life compatible with modern work, make housing less punishing, keep healthcare functional, and manage immigration competently. Threat 2. The Middle Income Trap, Polish edition. Poland has successfully navigated the catch-up phase. The next phase is harder. Innovation, productivity growth, research capacity, scaling domestic companies, and moving deeper into high-value production. A golden age in the 2030s requires Poland to evolve from being an excellent platform for investment into being a country that creates more of its champions. And that transition depends heavily on institutional stability, because high-value investment hates unpredictability. It doesn't demand perfection. It demands consistency, rule clarity, and confidence that tomorrow's rules won't be rewritten out of partisan spite. Threat 3. Energy transition costs and industrial competitiveness. Poland's energy security strategy is strong in one dimension, reducing leverage from a hostile supplier. But the energy transition is expensive in all regions. Grid modernization, new capacity, industrial decarbonization, and the legacy costs of older energy structures all add up. A golden age can survive expensive transitions if the state is competent and the public believes the pain buys real strategic value. It can fail if costs are chaotic, if corruption narratives grow, or if policy becomes a culture war battlefield where every infrastructure project is reinterpreted as betrayal. Threat 4. Regional divides turning into permanent political fuel. Poland's internal divides are real and are evolving over time. The classic Poland A and Poland B framing capture something. Yet increasingly, the sharper line in many countries is metro versus periphery, big cities and growth corridors versus smaller towns and rural areas that feel left behind. The danger is not only economic inequality, it's resentment. When people feel invisible, mocked, or locked out of opportunity, politics becomes identity warfare, and identity warfare makes long-term policy nearly impossible. A golden age requires a one-country strategy, development that doesn't leave half the map feeling like a waiting room. Threat 5. The duopoly and democracy by exhaustion. Now, let's turn our attention to the political duopoly. A duopoly itself isn't anti-democratic. Many democracies rotate between two big camps. The problem arises when this rotation turns into a form of governance driven by revenge. If each side treats the state as a trophy, then institutions become battlegrounds. Courts, prosecutors, regulators, public media, state companies, and even election oversight. When half the country believes the system is illegitimate whenever their side loses, democracy doesn't collapse overnight. It rots through fatigue. And once that fatigue sets in, the golden age stalls because investors, innovators, and ordinary people stop planning for the future and start bracing for the next political earthquake. Threat 6. Parallel realities and the loss of a shared truth. Modern states require at least a minimal shared reality to thrive. This is not about shared opinions, but about a shared reality. If politics becomes a world of parallel media ecosystems, constant scandal, total demonization, and foreign influence operations amplifying division, the public becomes exhausted. Exhausted societies trade long-term strength for short-term emotional relief. Institutional trust dwindles in such an environment. Compromise becomes a taboo term, and every national initiative becomes a matter of personal benefit. Threat 7. Security anxiety turning into policy overreaction. Poland's security concerns are legitimate, but fear can also justify bad policy. You can overspend poorly, underinvest in cyber and intelligence, militarize internal politics, and treat scrutiny as disloyalty. The difference between serious deterrence and expensive theater is competence, and competence requires oversight, transparency, and strategic discipline. A golden age doesn't mean ignoring threats. It means resisting panic and building capabilities that actually work. What Golden Age discipline looks like. The checklist Poland needs to follow. If Poland wants the next decade to resemble a golden age, it must demonstrate discipline in several key areas. The first is rule stability, predictable legal frameworks and institutions that survive elections, so that half the country doesn't feel the state is captured every time the other side wins. The second is defense as a system, not a shopping spree. Training, sustainment, ammunition, integration, domestic industrial capacity, and procurement transparency. The third is demographic realism. Housing, healthcare capacity, family policy that reflects modern reality, and immigration policy that is competent and humane. The fourth is innovation upgrade, moving deeper into high-value sectors and building more domestic champions. The fifth is one-country development, making sure modernization doesn't concentrate only in the largest cities. And the sixth is energy transition competence, keeping diversification wins while managing costs and grid modernization without turning it into identity warfare. So, is Poland entering its next golden age? Here's my answer. Poland is in the opening chapters of a possible golden age. The structural pieces exist: a strong convergence story, strategic geography, energy diversification, a serious deterrence posture, and an aspiration focused on stability and dignity. But demographic decline and institutional instability might prevent it. It's the combination of demographic decline, institutional instability, duopoly escalation, legitimacy fights, regional resentment, and the temptation to treat the state as spoils. Poland doesn't need to focus on winning political battles. It needs to surpass political adolescence. Golden ages aren't powered by vibes. They're powered by institutions people trust, even when they're frustrated. If you disagree with my perspective, that's perfectly fine. Please let me know where and which claim you disagree with, and I will provide sources so we can refine it together. If this episode gave you a new lens on Poland, do me a quick favor. Hit like, subscribe, share it with one person who still thinks Poland is just Eastern Europe, and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and which part you want me to go deeper on: economy, energy, defense, or the democracy duopoly question. And next time, we're going to tackle a topic that Western audiences constantly misread: why Poles can seem reserved, even suspicious, about forming shiny new alliances, outside the partners we already trust, and why that's often labeled close-minded, even though that label is usually a lazy shortcut. I'll unpack the historical wiring behind it: partitions, betrayals, hard lessons about guarantees, and the difference between friendly rhetoric and reliable security. And I'll show why modern Polish caution isn't refusal, it's risk management, and why the Poles don't want opportunity story is, in many cases, simply a fallacy. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.